everyone, this is Deepak, and in today's lecture we will be talking about literature, and of course English literature we will be talking about. We will make you understand what is literature and what is the scope of English literature, what is the definition, what is the meaning of English literature, and what are the criteria, what are the procedure that we can follow in order to understand the essence of literature, right? So let me tell you a very first thing, literature. The very first question I would like to ask from every one of you, if I ask you define the term literature, what do you think? Can you define it? I know you can define it to some extent, but I am sure most of you might be thinking, of course literature means any written documents. Yes, it is a written document, but it is not enough to define the literature in that way. If you want to define literature in its original essence, in its original form, then you need to think deep, you need to think profoundly, and only then you can define literature. So in this class of mine, I will be making you understand what is literature, what is the scope, and everything about literature, right? So see, first thing that I would like to define over here is the meaning of literature, the definition. See, there are many ways, there are many, plethora of ways through which you can define literature, but the simplest and the most lucid, understandable definition that I would like to put forth before you is any informative piece of writing. Any informative piece of writing can be termed as literature, right? This is the most lucid and understandable definition that you may have never heard, you may have never seen in any books, I am sure. Once you understand the meaning of this definition, I am sure you would have some curiosity, you would have some curiosity to know more about literature, right? So first, any informative piece, any informative piece, whatever we see through our naked eyes, whatever we see around us. For example, if I see bottle, if I see computer, if I see this digital board, and I have pen in my hand, anything that you see around you can be termed as literature, right? But there is a condition. What is the condition? The condition is that is the thing suggestive or not? Does something suggest you something or not? If anything which is suggestive, which suggests you something, that informs you something, it is literature. So very important thing, I think you should focus on this. Any informative piece of writing, any informative piece of writing, anything that you see through your naked eyes can be termed as literature, but that literature must meet one basic condition, and the condition is it must be suggestive. It must be suggestive or informative. So these two qualities must have to be anything literature, right? For example, if I see, just look at this digital board, and you might be seeing lots and lots of things are written over here, right? After reading something, does that thing suggest you something? Leave this example. Now take another example. You go to medical shop and buy a syrup, cough syrup for example. The moment you buy a cough syrup, you might be seeing lots of things are written on the bottle. After reading the instruction or the ingredients, does that thing suggest you something? Does it give something, information about something? If it is so, you can consider such thing as literature. So basic condition, the basic fundamental point to term something as literature is its suggestiveness, its informative, right? So any informative piece that may be informative, okay, writing can be termed as literature, but it must meet two basic conditions, and the condition is suggestive. It must be suggestive, and it must be what? Informative. Unless or until it is suggestive or informative, you cannot consider something as literature. So this is the very fundamental definition that I thought you must know, and after this I will be going ahead to some extent, right? So please look at the board, and I will make you understand something more than what you have ever expected, right? When we talk about literature, literature can be of many types. It can be oral literature, it can be written literature, right? It can be pictorial literature, it can be anecdotal literature. But here we would be talking about two sorts of literature which are very much common in our daily life. We'll be talking about written literature and pictorial literature. You may have heard, you may have seen, you may have met artists, drawing pictures, drawing lots and lots of, wall painting, kind of sketch painting, everything. Of course, the artist is the best example of a good artist. He is an artist because he paints something, he draws something. So, of course, the work that he is doing, it is a part of literature, it is a kind of literature. But here, we would not be talking about that kind of literature. We would be talking about written literature. When we talk about English literature, it is a written literature. It is a record, it is cumulative record, which is there put, and we learn something out of that, right? So, see, so, types of literature. When we say types of literature, so literature can be categorized under many heads, but as I told you, we'll be focusing on only two types of literature. So, see, first is written literature, and second is pictorial literature, right? Written literature and pictorial literature. Any literature which is there in the form of picture, which is in the form of some drawings, you can consider such literature as pictorial literature. It is also suggestive, it is also informative. For example, if you look at the picture of Mahatma Gandhi, if you look at the picture of Subhash Chandra Bose, the moment you look at this, such pictures, don't you think it is suggesting you something? Of course, it suggests you something. The moment you look at such picture, it's you might be thinking, oh, he is Mahatma Gandhi, he has done great piece of work in his life, he liberated us from the Britishers, right? So the ideas that come while looking at some picture, while looking at something, of course, it is suggesting you something, it is informing you something. It means it is a part of literature, it is a kind of literature. It's another matter that it is not written literature, but it is pictorial literature, right? Now, I hope you must have understood pictorial literature. The moment we talk about written literature means any cumulative records, any records which are available in written form. You can consider such literature as written literature. For example, English literature, then Hindi literature, then Sanskrit literature. Enormous. It's never ending. Okay. But there is a question that I think you should know about it first. Which language has literature? Which language should have literature? Have you ever wondered? Have you ever thought? See, the language that has struggled very hard, that has strived very hard in its past, only such languages can have literature. Otherwise, there are many and many languages which are called regional languages that languages don't have literature. So, to have literature, the language has to struggle, language has to strive very hard in its past, and only then, only on that basis, you can say this language has literature. For example, Sanskrit. It is said that Sanskrit is the mother of all languages. Everyone knows, everyone is familiar with this statement, right? English has also great literature. Hindi too has its great literature. Telugu has its own literature. Malayalam has its own literature. Bhojpuri language, which is spoken in some part of the Bihar, it has its own literature. But there are many languages that you may have heard that doesn't have literature. For example, Maghi and regional languages. I am not recalling exactly what are such languages, but there are many languages that don't have literature simply because the languages are very much limited. They are very much compressed, and they have not struggled very hard. They were not very popular, very famous in their past. This is the only reason the language that has literature and language that don't have literature, right? Now, so I think two things cleared. First, definition of literature. Second, types of literature, right? Now, when we talk about literature, we mean good literature. We mean good literature because, as I told you, any piece of writing which may be informative and suggestive. So, two basic qualities, two fundamental qualities a literature must have it applies to all literature. It is not only it is not so that it is there it is so with English or it is so with Hindi. It applies this very formula, this is very universal formula that applies to almost all the literature of the world. Okay, so any literature, before you consider some language whether this language has literature or not, just listen one thing. A language literature must have two basic qualities. First, it must be suggestive, and second, it must be informative. And only on these two fundamental basis you can consider literature is good literature, or in fact it is a literature. Otherwise it is just language, it is just kind of mediocre literature, you can say, right? So when we talk about literature, we only mean good literature. So right now I am going to give you 5 qualities to be a good literature. How will you be able to figure out whether this literature is good literature or this literature is bad literature, or whether this literature is, of course it is not literature, right? So focus and try to understand. Very important thing that I am going to tell you before you know 5 basic qualities a literature. When I say a literature, I mean good literature. Okay, so do not get confused. Okay, 5 basic qualities a literature must have, right? So when I say literature must have, do not forget, I mean good literature, right? So what are these 5 qualities that a literature must have? Very important, please pay attention. First, what is the first quality and first and foremost quality that a literature must have? See, first, a good literature elevates human mindsets. Very important. This is the first and foremost quality that a literature must have. Otherwise, you cannot consider the literature as good literature. A literature must be elevative in its nature. What? Elevative in its nature. So, good literature elevates human mindsets. It elevates, it sublimes human consciousness. It sublimes human, temperament. It sublimes human habits. It sublimes humans' overall personality. Right. So, this is the very, very first and the basic quality a literature must have. Now, the second quality that I would like to give over here is a good literature cultures us, civilizes us, right? So good literature, for example, if you are reading a good text, it doesn't mean that you are just reading. If you are reading good literature, good text, it means it must culture your habits, it must culture your behaviors, it must civilizes overall personality of yours, and only then you can say it is a good literature, right? The third quality, a good literature must be motivating, right? A good literature is very important quality. If literature is not motivating you, it is not generating curiosity in your personality, in your mindset, it is not the quality, it is not the domain of good literature. So good literature all the time, it motivates you to do something more in your life, right? Now, fourth quality, a good literature helps you to figure out what is right and what is wrong. Very important. If you consider yourself as an educated man and you are not able to know, if you are not able to figure out what is right for you and what is wrong for you, what is right for the society, what is wrong for the society, what is right for the people around you and what is the bad for people around you, if you are not able to figure out even this very simple thing, it means you have not read good literature. Good literature must filter your personality, must filter your mindset, so that you can figure out any problems that you are facing, that you are coping, right? And the last quality a good literature must have is last quality. Would you suggest something, everyone? Would you suggest something? What may be the fifth quality of a good literature? Okay, I think you may be trying, but if you are trying and still you are not getting it, what may be the fifth quality of literature? So, fifth quality that I am giving you is very important. A good literature, a good literature manifests, a good literature manifests something cardinal and spiritual, thoughts within you. Very important. Last but not the least, within you. Very important. This is the fifth quality of a good literature. If you are reading something and if you are reading something since long and it is not manifesting something more than what you have expected, it means you are not familiar with good literature. Good literature means it manifests what it manifests. It gives you what? Something cardinal, very pure and spiritual thoughts, right? So cardinal thoughts, spiritual thoughts are the backbones of good literature. If it is not elevating, if it is not generating, if it is not preparing you accordingly, it means you are not in touch with good literature. So for today it's enough, I think, and in the upcoming classes we'll be talking much more about literature and much more about different topics. Thank you very much everyone. Thank you very much.